Capcom Cup, where do we begin? First things first, let's keep it positive, man. I thought Gil looked pretty cool. The update to the game. It seems like a lot of people are having fun with the patch, right? Seth, I think, Gil was really cool. The patch seems fun. I like that they were kind of unafraid to experiment. Last year of Street Fighter V on paper, right? They're just kind of just throwing shit at the wall, letting people have fun with it. That's pretty cool. Feels like an Arxis patch in a way, right? But it's kind of weird that Arxis is trying to make Street Fighter trying to make Arxis. I don't know. Anyway, I don't think it did anything for core issues of the game. Any of the things that people complain about, like the net play or like the one-player content, didn't address any of those issues. But if you still play Street Fighter V, if you still like it, it seems like it was the kind of content that maybe you'd be into. Like I said, it's more of the same, but for what it is, it seems fine, I think. Right? Can you imagine if it's 2016 when Street Fighter V is supposed to launch, and instead of getting what we got, imagine if it launches with either Season 2 or Arcade Edition, and then a year and a half, 2 years later down the line, they bring in Championship Edition. And imagine if it had proper integration of rollback netcode, and if it had a little bit more one-player content to it. Imagine how different the trajectory of the game could have been, right? We'll never know. I think now it's gotten to the point where the game has enough content in it to where that, like, that issue, that complaint isn't really valid anymore, right? There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of stuff to it. It's just, it feels like the right things are kind of missing, right? But all in all, it seems like a lot of people are content with it, and if you're a competitive player and you're having fun with it, then that's cool. It seems like it's kind of the right recipe for that. That said, the matches were sick, as you would expect, right? It's the final for a world tour. It should be the best of the best. It should be really good matches, and it did deliver in that regard, right? The fact that in the end it comes down to IDOM versus Punk for 3 years in a row, like directly to IDOM, says, I'm gatekeeping you, and he does it 2 to 3 years in a row, consistently, in multiple events, in multiple ways. The fact that it comes down to them two at the end again, with Punk winner's side, IDOM loser's side, IDOM resets, and then in Yu-Gi-Oh fashion, mentally just guard crushes, just mental guard crush, and then IDOM runs it. That's fucking wild. That's insane to me. To be honest with you, I'm still like, damn, he won that shit. It's really interesting too, because IDOM, I think, has been one of the better players in North America for a minute, but just lacked the big stage win or that high impact win when he needed it too, right? For him to finally get that on his nemesis, on the one that's been going out of his way to gatekeep him like that, that's fucking poetic. That's godlike. That's awesome. That's the positive. Get those out the way. Cause and the shame is, right? The shame is for these positives that we just talked about. You walk away from this weekend and none of that is the dialogue. That's not my key. That should have just been my only takeaway, right? Like, goddamn, IDOM did that shit. But there was so much other bullshit that happened in the background, foreground for that matter, that you can't even. It almost takes away from. And before anybody says anything, what happens a lot now is, you say something or you participate in a discourse, and people are very quick to write you off. Obama is a Capcom hater. He's a Street Fighter hater. I cannot stress this enough. I feel like you have to be under the age of 18 to even say some shit like that to me, first of all. Second, I want to say this, because I think that I speak for a lot of people when I say this. There is no one in North America that plays fighting games and is not at heart a Capcom fanboy. The difference is, some of us have varying degrees to which they are willing to just ignore the truth and lie to themselves. With 95% certainty, I can say that. So when people say stuff like that, I wonder, like, at what point do you let that cloud your vision? At what point do you let loyalty to a brand or a company cloud your vision? I don't know. I'll start with this. This is my second Capcom Cup. I went last year as well. You know, Capcom Cup, it's by now their, 5th or 6th year, right? I thought that the event was kind of, how do I say this? Not negatively say this, but like, it's kind of like basic or bland. Like, there isn't that much to it. It's really just like, just go to the tournament, which is fine. That's okay. But I guess my kind of vision for it way back when was, I thought it would be the kind of event where it's built around the tournament, right? But eventually you kind of tack on other things to make it kind of like its own kind of event like that, where you try to draw in not just super competitive players, but then also normal fans too, right? I was thinking of it turn into something kind of like where you show up, there's maybe some interviews or some panels with like voice actors or some shit. I don't know, man, all that kind of stuff. I thought it could turn into that kind of event. And I'm talking way back when, right? Like 2013, 2014. I thought that that's what they were working toward. And especially seemed that way when it was a part of that Sony event in SoCal. What was it? PS Experience? It definitely felt that way from the outside looking in. I wasn't at those. I just thought it would have been trying to become something different. It's compared to like last year's Capcom Cup. The key question I had inside the entire time was, who is this event for? Even now, I can't figure out who the event is for. And before we go into this, I'll address this one thing. I saw a lot of people getting really aggro on social media and stuff like that regarding a couple topics. First is criticism of the event. The second is people that are perceived to be the head of the event. On one end, I saw a lot of like these weird like narratives and counter narratives from from people that obviously have vested interest in the shit. But then I saw a lot of other people talking about specific people and individuals making some pretty strong accusations. Listen, this is something that especially the Western Street Fighter community has to get through their heads. You have to be aware that the perceived faces or mouthpieces for certain companies are not always the people making the decisions. That's a very important point to recognize. Just the way some of it is, right? It's messed up, man. And look, if you want to like look up examples or something, like dude, you can look around. I'm not gonna hold your hand here. Use Google, use Bing.com, the world's #1 search engine. You can look up people's experiences working for the North American branch of some of these companies. A certain taste for what their experience is like. I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I definitely thought it was really weird years back when Seth left. The second Seth left, that was like a red flag to me. I'm like, hold on, something ain't right here. If you didn't know what the relationship was like then, certainly after that happened, you should have definitely been asking some questions. When I asked the question, who is this event for? I go checklist, right? It's for the competitors. It can't be for the competitors because there was way too much stuff that did not have the competitors in mind at all. That straight up was not up to standard, not up to par. Was it for attendees? Maybe, but even I felt like in the venue, it was mostly fine, I guess. But it's not like there's a lot to do, right? You had a photo booth where you could pose as a Street Fighter character with some costume stuff. You had casual stations, and that was really it. Is it for the viewers at home? From what I watched a good bit in person and on stream. I didn't think that it was a particularly good viewing experience. I didn't think it was up to par. To be quite honest with you. And the irony is that this was produced by ESL. ESL on paper is one of the biggest, it's one of the largest production companies for gaming events in the world. And I thought that from the bottoms up, it just like was so tone deaf and just missed on so many levels. Pricing for this event. Did you see this? This is how much tickets were. Everything from, of course, again, now to like, when you go back and look at the LCQ not being streamed, when you look at losers brackets matches being shoved off stream, I do think that there was some obvious scheduling errors, and I think a lot of it happened because of communication mistakes early on that I don't think were caught until late. Even if you look at the schedule for the way the event was supposed to go down, I think Street Fighter League was supposed to start on at 6 on Saturday. I don't think they started till like 9 p.m. And that was with them running stuff off stream. I don't think that they knew that it was 1st to 3 until the day or two before. If you looked at the initial rules in the initial form that, some people put out, it said 2 out of 3. And a lot of people were like, wait, what? And I thought Capcom Cup was 1st to 3 all the way through. They said, oh, our bad. But I don't think that they adjusted the schedule to reflect that change. Or maybe they underestimated how long that would take. Friday, they had the LCQ in the bar area of the same venue on the 2nd floor. It was kind of a narrow space. And maybe for that reason, it felt very packed. But when I went up there for the LCQ, I thought that they had a lot of people in there. There was probably there was at least 200 towards the end, I think. I think maybe some people went home as they lost. As soon as Moke beat Jesse, everybody got to get out. Like, literally, as soon as he beat him, as soon as it said KO, they were shutting everything down. Everybody had to leave. I don't think a lot of the setups had headphones on them either, right? So competitor experience, very lame already. Can I show you guys something? Check this out. So this is the Jaypee site where they pretty much catalog the entire weekend. And just, it's about what you would expect. These things, all right? So what you guys have to understand is when you work production, mistakes happen all the time. The best people make mistakes. You watch any stream from any production crew, there's going to be stuff like this that happens. But for it to have happened with the consistency that it was happening, not just on stream, but in the venue as well. Again, it's the consistency that bothered me. And I'm talking like, it's not like it's only like that for a few seconds going into a new set like that. Dude, it's game 3, game 4 of some of these sets, and the shit's still wrong. I genuinely believe that some of these occasions, they just didn't know. So this is Chikesoku blog. This is like the Jaypee log for everything that happened this past weekend, right? So first things first, they talk about Yoshinori Ono's apology tweet, right? Like, we apologize for not streaming the LCQ. We'll work hard next year to make sure it's up to par. There's this Capcom Fighters tweet where they're like, you know what? We know that this year was whack. We'll try harder next year. Angry Birds interview. They talked about how he just got off of his loss, and he was talking about like the monitors having input delay, right, or lag. And this is where it gets kind of weird, right? We might not ever know. But I think it's going to evolve to the point where now players are going to want to see some form of proof that the setups don't lag. It doesn't matter who it is or who's running the event. But obviously Punk, he loses the IDOM after how many times did he hit crouch jab, and then do nothing? There might have been something there. Maybe it's placebo. We don't know. I can tell you for a fact, Momochi, when he was on player 2 side, he was in the middle of his set. A game ends. He turns game mode onto the monitor. That's unfortunate, right? That happened, but it's consistent enough of a problem to where I think in the future production crews are probably going to have to end up showing some form of proof that would be able to kind of get players off their backs, I think, because there's multiple ways that the setup could have lagged. It could have been because of a non-powered USB extension. It could have been from Bluetooth interference. It could have been from the monitor not being on game mode. It could have been from PlayStation overheating. It could have been, there's like 3 or 4 different ways, and especially like think about what I just said. Day 1, Momochi's puts it on game mode. Problem should be solved, right? But then day 2, you still have people saying it's an issue. It was probably, who's to say? It could have been multiple factors. We don't know. We weren't there. Now, here's the thing. Itazan was not even qualified for Capcom Cup this year. He was in the LCQ. And he's saying on the first day, they had lag on the monitor. He said last year in his first match, the monitor was not set to gaming mode. And then, of course, this year, they had the same problem at Capcom Cup. In particular, he says, like, it's really sad that, like, the events are still kind of being like this. He's like, we haven't even really started our year 1 of esports. We can't even get the basics right, essentially, is what he's saying. He's questioning kind of, like, the competitive integrity of a lot of these events. Big Bird, obviously, not very happy, right? He said this. You had, again, people trying to be like, hey, man, everything's cool. Not exactly everybody's happy, right? That kind of thing. We still in preseason, pretty much. Yeah. And all of these, well into sets, running the losers off stream. What do you think impressions were of that? Look at the first comment. He's like, man, this shit was trash. That's literally the first comment. That's all I'm going to read. But the problem is, overall, it felt like the mood was poor as a result of a lot of those missteps. What should be a celebration of the game, its competition, and the community around it, instead of a celebration, to me, this particular event felt more like an obligation than a celebration. The Pocky halftime show, who was that for? I really don't know. I came to watch Capcom Cup. I came to watch the best play. I think it says a lot when, like, ESPN esports correspondents had more attention paid to them and their setup than the competition at hand. And again, the thing is, you can't just go off at the hip, just firing off on people that you think are in control and that you think are responsible for this stuff just because they're the faces of something, right? It sucks. That's really shitty for them because they got to deal with all you Goombas, man, and they on some shit that they didn't even make a call on, right? But what you got to come back to is somebody definitely made the decisions here. Somebody definitely made decisions to do this stuff. You don't know who, I don't know who, but to be honest with you, man, part of the way I feel is, and I would take this to every other community, because I feel this way across the board with a lot of other communities too. I don't like that this happens, they drop the update, good on them, drop a cool character, good on them, but then it's squashed. Nobody asks questions, nobody's talking. Some of these players busted their ass for 10 months out of the year to make it to this event, and what they got in return was so, I mean, how do you even say it otherwise? It was a huge step back. I don't know what it was. I don't know what this was for. How can you justify, like, how is the VIP after party included as part of that package, but not the actual competition on Friday? And the thing that gets me is a lot of the excuses and a lot of the reasonings that I've heard, like, oh, well, it's budget. Budget? That doesn't make any sense. They paid Kenny Omega's appearance fee. They had the VIP stream on some budget. Maybe, I don't know, but it doesn't sound right. Somebody had to make some of these decisions. And and like I said, I'm not saying, you know, don't be the Spanish Inquisition or anything like that. But that's something that you have to be aware of. You have to recognize that. I don't know what some of the answers were here, but because I mean I wasn't a part of it. I wasn't on production or anything. But to me is like I saw this event this year and I did not know who it was for. I didn't feel like I had a particularly good time as an attendee. I didn't feel like the competitors were very happy. Viewers at home seemed like okay, somewhat not, you know. But as a result, to me, it's really simple. If you play fighting games, if you like fighting games, if you give me good matches and you give me casuals and you give me a tournament to play in, generally I'm pretty happy. Again, I just don't know, man. When you look at what is happening with CPT especially, right? I think it's still a little bit too early to make some calls on it because they haven't released all the details yet. So I want to hold off on that actually. But there's some big questions that we have lined up. And some of it I think is in line with what I've been saying. I think that CPT diminishes in terms of like what they want to invest in it this year and maybe next year a little bit, and that they want to segue. They want to transition over to doing like focusing more on Street Fighter League. They want to be able to push that over instead, right? Why is it that this year? Why has Tekken World Tour? I'm just saying, man. You remember last week we were like, you know what, man? The group stage rules, we don't know about that. It seems like every complaint that you could have had about TWT, or everything that you could have said negatively about it, I went to this and I was like, holy shit. It was like night and day. Like, what are you talking about? That shit was awesome. I don't know. It was really weird. There's a lot of just really questionable decision making there that I'm just not sure about. It didn't feel very good though. It was not a very good mood, I think, in general. What I hope that it at least becomes the kind of event where, at minimum, they put the players first. Especially with the way that tour is and what that game is in particular. The players prop it up, right? It's the players that keep that going. So it's kind of weird for them to have an event where it's supposed to be about the players that have been playing all year long, and it's supposed to have this degree of prestige, right? And it just did not have it this year, man. It really didn't. But anyway, that's how I feel.